Across the sands of time, certain stories have echoed with a haunting resonance, whispering of events that shaped the destiny of humanity in ways both wondrous and terrible. Among the most mysterious of these accounts is the story of the Watchers, celestial beings described in ancient sacred writings, whose presence on earth altered the course of history forever. They appear in the shadows of biblical tradition, most vividly in the pages of the Book of Enoch, a text that, though absent from most modern Bibles, holds keys to understanding one of the most perplexing intersections between heaven and earth. The Watchers are not presented as mere angels fulfilling divine assignments, but as a distinct order, heavenly beings whose purpose was to observe, to watch, and perhaps to safeguard humanity. Yet the record tells of a rebellion, a moment when those who were meant to guard instead crossed the boundaries set by the Creator. In stepping down from their appointed stations, they stepped into a web of temptation, desire, and disobedience, setting into motion a chain of events that would ripple through every generation that followed. Ancient texts speak of their descent with a strange mixture of awe and dread. They were not imagined as vague spiritual forces, but as beings of striking presence, carrying with them a knowledge that humanity had not yet been permitted to hold. Their story is one of contradiction. They came from realms of light, yet their actions led to the spread of darkness. They were once clothed in the authority of heaven, yet they chose to bind themselves to the earth through forbidden unions and the sharing of secrets meant to remain sealed. The name Watchers is itself a puzzle. Why were they watching? Were they guardians sent to protect, or witnesses sent to testify against the growing corruption of mankind? The Book of Enoch paints them as watchful sentinels placed over nations, only to see them fall into the very sins they were meant to restrain. This paradox, divine beings corrupted by their own desires, becomes the heartbeat of their mystery. In many ways, their narrative is more than a tale from antiquity. It is a mirror held up to humanity itself. It forces us to confront the timeless struggle between knowledge and obedience, between the longing to ascend in understanding and the danger of grasping what is not ours to take. The forbidden knowledge they shared was not merely a set of practical skills or mystical arts, it was a seed, planted in the human heart, that could grow into either wisdom or destruction, depending on the soil in which it was sown. The Watchers did not come quietly. Their descent was not hidden in obscurity, but marked by a covenant of rebellion, a pact made upon Mount Hermon, where they swore an oath together to carry out their defiance. This was not a single act of impulse, but a deliberate choice, a collective turning from the order of heaven to the passions of earth. The implications of that moment still stir debate among theologians, historians, and seekers of truth alike. When we speak of their influence, we speak not only of the birth of strange civilizations or the rise of myths and legends. We speak of a foundational shift in the human story, where the boundaries between the divine and the mortal blurred. They carried the fire of heaven into the hands of men, and like all fire, it could either illuminate or consume. The tension between these two outcomes lies at the center of their legacy. To understand the Watchers is to step into a world where the spiritual and the physical are intertwined in ways that challenge the limits of human reasoning. Their actions stirred divine judgment, but also unveiled a hidden dimension of the spiritual war that has never ceased. The ancient psalmist once declared in Psalm 1 verse 2, that the blessed man delights in the law of the Lord and meditates on it day and night. The Watchers, in their turning away from the law, reveal by contrast the peril of casting aside divine instruction for the sake of personal desire. This story is not confined to dusty scrolls or long-forgotten myths. It continues to resonate because it touches on questions that still burn within the human soul. Where does true wisdom come from? What happens when the thirst for power overcomes the call to righteousness? And could it be that in understanding the Watchers, we are also uncovering patterns that repeat themselves in every age, including our own? The mystery of the Watchers beckons the curious, but it also warns the wise. Their tale is a door into the ancient past, but it opens into corridors that lead directly into the present moment. To follow their story is to trace the contours of a spiritual landscape shaped by rebellion, judgment, and the lingering allure of knowledge that was never meant to be stolen. It is an invitation to see history not only as a record of human deeds, but as the unfolding drama of heaven and earth in constant collision. High upon the ridges of Mount Hermon, under the open sky, a moment unfolded that would mark the crossing of a line never meant to be breached. The watchers, once radiant in the courts of heaven, stood upon the earth they were only meant to observe. Their descent was more than a change in location. It was the breaking of an order, the choice to abandon the place assigned by the Creator for the lure of something that stirred within them. The records preserved in the Book of Enoch speak of a pact, a deliberate agreement made among them. 200 in number, they bound themselves together with an oath, pledging to act as one. The decision was not a passing impulse. It was a calculated rebellion. Their leader, Semyaza, feared that if only a few of them acted, they would bear the punishment alone. To ease that fear, they swore together, each binding himself to the other in a covenant of disobedience. They had been witnesses to the beauty of creation, but now they sought to take for themselves what was not given to them. They desired the daughters of men, whose beauty had caught their eyes. This was not a union sanctioned by heaven. It was a mixing of what was meant to remain apart, the merging of mortal and immortal in a way that disrupted the very balance of creation. The words of Genesis 6 give a brief yet weighty record. The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were fair, and they took them as wives, all of whom they chose. This choice would carry consequences reaching far beyond their own fate. Their descent was a physical act, yet it also carried a deeper meaning. It symbolized pride, a refusal to remain within the limits of divine authority. They brought with them not only their presence, but also their influence. As they stepped upon the slopes of Mount Hermon, heaven itself felt the fracture. The harmony of the divine order had been disturbed, and a shadow began to spread across the earth. Mount Hermon became the silent witness to their vow, its stones holding the echoes of voices that once spoke in the language of the celestial realm. From that height, they descended into the lives of men, taking wives, raising children, and introducing knowledge that had remained sealed until that moment. Their choice was not a quiet ripple in history. It was the breaking of a great dam, releasing a flood of influence that would reshape the course of human destiny. What began as desire soon became a transformation of culture, morality, and the spiritual fabric of the world. The watchers had crossed from heaven into earth, and with them came the seeds of a knowledge both powerful and perilous. Once the watchers settled among men, their influence became visible not only in the lives they touched, but in the very fabric of human society. They came bearing teachings that had been hidden from the eyes of mankind, mysteries of creation, secrets of the heavens, and skills that, once known, could not be forgotten. These were not mere curiosities. They were transformative tools that shaped the way humanity thought, worked, and waged war. The writings of Enoch speak of the many things they revealed. Azazel taught men to fashion weapons, swords, knives, shields, and breastplates, changing forever the way conflicts were fought. Until then, human struggles had been bound to the strength of arm and the stone of the earth. Now they wielded forged metal, sharper and deadlier than anything before. Violence grew not only in frequency, but in intensity, for the art of war had been placed into the hands of those unprepared to wield it with restraint. Semyaza taught enchantments and root cuttings, opening the door to sorcery and the manipulation of natural forces for purposes outside the will of God. Others taught the movement of the stars, the mapping of the heavens, and the interpretation of celestial signs. Astronomy, which in its pure form declares the glory of God as in Psalm 19 verse 1, was turned toward astrology, using the positions of the stars not for worship of the Creator, but for the shaping of fate according to human desire. One among them taught the art of cosmetics, the painting of the face, and the beautifying of the body in ways that enticed and seduced. What might seem a simple matter of appearance was, in their instruction, intertwined with a deeper distortion. a shift toward vanity, lust, and the objectifying of beauty as a tool of power. These teachings, though they appeared as gifts, carried hidden dangers. Knowledge without reverence can quickly become a weapon. The wisdom of the Watchers was not grounded in the fear of the Lord, and so it bred arrogance, greed, and division. Humanity was lifted into realms of skill and insight it had never known, but it was also drawn deeper into corruption. The tools of cultivation became the tools of destruction, and the art of healing became mingled with the craft of sorcery. The Watchers had not merely visited the earth, they had rewritten the story of human development. In their wake, kingdoms rose with advancements that dazzled the eyes but darkened the soul. It was a paradox of progress. The light of understanding mingled with the shadow of sin. The world could never return to its former innocence, for the veil between the sacred and the profane had been torn. From the forbidden unions between the Watchers and the daughters of men came offspring unlike any the world had ever known. They were called the Nephilim, giants in stature, but even greater in their capacity to dominate, to oppress, and to consume. Their presence on the earth brought fear, for their strength was unmatched and their appetites were vast. The ancient texts described them as men of renown, yet their renown was not for virtue but for power and violence. They filled the earth with bloodshed, using their might not to protect but to rule and to destroy. The Nephilim became living symbols of the corruption that follows when boundaries set by the Creator are crossed. These beings were not merely large in size. They were mighty in influence. They stood at the center of the growing chaos, leading humanity deeper into rebellion against God. They consumed more than the earth could sustain, and in their hunger they turned upon both man and beast. Legends of giants in the folklore of many ancient cultures may well trace their roots back to these hybrid offspring, whose unnatural origin marked them as a threat to the balance of creation. The arrival of the Nephilim signaled a world out of harmony. Where once the Creator looked upon his work and saw that it was good, now the earth groaned under the weight of violence and corruption. These giants embodied the consequences of the Watchers' rebellion, not only in physical form, but in the spiritual decay they brought with them. It was in this age that the cry of human suffering rose to heaven, and the patience of God began to reach its limit. The Nephilim were more than a chapter in the story of the Watchers. They were the living proof that the mixture of the divine and the mortal, outside of God's design, leads to devastation on a scale that no mortal power can contain. The rebellion of the Watchers did not pass unnoticed, nor did the corruption they spread go unanswered. The same God who had set the stars in their place and established the boundaries of the seas looked upon the earth and saw that it had been filled with violence. What had been entrusted to the care of mankind had been defiled by the influence of those who once stood in his presence. The writings of Enoch describe how the Most High sent word through the archangels to pronounce judgment upon the Watchers. Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel were sent to act as messengers and enforcers of divine justice. Their orders were clear: bind the leaders of the rebellion, strip them of their freedom, and cast them into the depths of the earth until the day of judgment. Azazel, who had taught the forging of weapons and the adornment of the body, was singled out for his role in leading humanity into sin. He was bound hand and foot, cast into darkness, and covered with jagged stones until the final reckoning. Semyaza and the others were likewise bound, held in the abyss, their fate sealed until the great day when they would face the full measure of divine wrath. The judgment did not end with the binding of the Watchers. The earth itself was cleansed through the waters of the great flood, an act of both justice and mercy. The Nephilim, whose existence had brought terror and ruin, were swept away in the deluge, their legacy preserved only in the warnings of Scripture and the whispers of ancient memory. The fall of the Watchers stands as a testimony to the certainty of divine judgment. Pride and rebellion, even among those who once stood in the light of heaven, cannot escape the reach of the Creator's justice. The psalmist declares in Psalm 103 verse 19, that the Lord has established his throne in heaven, and his kingdom rules over all. No being, however mighty, can overturn that rule. Yet even in judgment, there's a revelation of God's nature. His justice is not born of cruelty, but of a love that will not allow creation to remain corrupted. By removing the Watchers and their offspring, He preserved the possibility of redemption for the generations yet to come. The story of their fall is both a warning and a reminder. The boundaries set by God are not chains to restrict life, but walls to guard it from destruction. The teachings of the Watchers did not vanish with their imprisonment. Seeds of their knowledge had already been planted deep within the hearts and minds of humanity. Even after the floodwaters receded, remnants of their influence appeared like shadows across the pages of human history. Ancient civilizations rose with sudden bursts of advancement, as though guided by hands unseen. The Sumerians, often regarded as one of the first great civilizations, recorded tales of gods descending from the heavens to bestow wisdom upon mankind. Their cuneiform tablets speak of deities who taught the building of cities, the ordering of laws, and the tracking of celestial movements. While historians may interpret these accounts as myth, the patterns echo the legacy of the Watchers, knowledge brought down from above, mingled with the worship of those who gave it. In Egypt, monumental architecture emerged with a precision that still confounds scholars. The alignment of the pyramids with celestial bodies, the mastery of engineering, and the elaborate religious systems bear the marks of advanced understanding. Whether through oral tradition or direct survival of forbidden teachings, the fingerprints of the Watchers seem to rest upon these early kingdoms. Across the ocean, the Mayans and other Mesoamerican cultures built temples aligned with the solstices and equinoxes, tracked the heavens with astonishing accuracy, and developed complex calendars. Their myths speak of sky beings who came to teach them secrets of agriculture, architecture, and time. It is as though each ancient culture carried a fragment of a greater story, passed down in different tongues yet sharing the same outline. Beings from above brought knowledge to earth, and that knowledge altered the path of civilization. Some of it led to flourishing art and architecture, but much of it deepened humanity's drift from the worship of the true God toward the adoration of false gods. The echoes of the Watchers are not only seen in stone and script, but also in the continuation of spiritual practices they once introduced: astrology, divination, and forms of ritual that blur the lines between worship and sorcery. These practices, embedded in the spiritual DNA of early civilizations, ensured that the influence of the Watchers would linger far beyond their physical presence on Earth. The flood may have erased their bodies, but it could not erase every trace of their teachings. The knowledge imparted by the Watchers was never neutral. It carried with it a spiritual agenda, a subtle and enduring war for the hearts of men. The forging of weapons, the reading of the stars, the weaving of enchantments, these were more than technical skills. They were invitations into a worldview where human desire replaced divine guidance, where power eclipsed humility, and where creation was bent to serve the will of the creature rather than the creator. Spiritual deception became one of the most potent legacies of the Watchers. Through the arts of magic, divination, and sorcery, they opened channels for humanity to seek wisdom and power apart from God. These practices created a hunger for control over the unseen, a fascination with manipulating reality through rituals, symbols, and hidden knowledge. What began as curiosity often led to bondage, as those who pursued such paths became entangled in forces they could not master. The war for the human soul is not fought on visible battlefields alone. It takes place in the mind and the heart, where truth and falsehood contend for allegiance. The teachings of the Watchers had shifted the spiritual compass of humanity, pointing it away from the worship of God and toward the worship of creation, of self, and of powers that promise freedom but deliver chains. This battle has never ceased. Even in the modern age, the same patterns emerge: movements, ideologies, and systems of thought that elevate human reasoning above divine revelation. Occult practices flourish under new names, and secret societies cloak ancient rites in the language of progress and enlightenment. What is unseen to the eye is still active in the spirit, and the struggle remains as urgent as when the watchers first descended. The knowledge they gave was dangerous not because knowledge itself is evil, but because it came severed from the wisdom and holiness of the one who created all things. It is this separation that turned a gift into a weapon, and it is this same separation that fuels the ongoing conflict for the destiny of every soul. Among the ancient writings that shed light on the story of the Watchers, the Book of Enoch stands apart. It offers a narrative both vivid and sobering, portraying in detail the descent of these beings, the corruption that followed, and the divine judgment that ensued. Yet for much of history, this book has been absent from the canon of Scripture recognized by most traditions. The Book of Enoch describes conversations between Enoch, the great-grandfather of Noah, and the angels who revealed to him the truth about the Watchers. It records the cries of the earth, the pleas of the righteous, and the pronouncements of judgment from the throne of God. In its pages, the hidden motives of the Watchers are laid bare, and the consequences of their rebellion are spelled out in stark detail. Why such a text was excluded from most biblical collections remains a point of debate. Some suggest it was to prevent confusion, others that it was to distance the faithful from the mystical elements it contains. Yet the very absence of the book has fueled speculation, leading many to wonder whether its removal was part of a larger pattern of suppressing knowledge that might challenge established theological structures. For those who have read it, the Book of Enoch serves as both a warning and a witness. It warns of the dangers of seeking wisdom apart from God and bears witness to the reality of spiritual rebellion that reaches into the highest realms. It reminds the reader that the battle between obedience and pride is not only a human struggle, but one that began in the heavens themselves. Though excluded from much of the modern canon, the book survives as a testament to the events that shaped the ancient world. Its survival through centuries of suppression is itself a kind of providence, ensuring that the account of the Watchers would not be erased completely. It stands in quiet defiance against forgetfulness, speaking across the ages to those willing to listen. The account of the Watchers is not merely a record of what happened long ago. It is a mirror held up to every generation. Their fall carries lessons meant to guard humanity from repeating the same errors, lessons that remain urgent in an age where the boundaries between wisdom and pride are often blurred. One of the clearest lessons is that knowledge without reverence is dangerous. The Watchers possessed extraordinary understanding, yet their wisdom was corrupted by the absence of obedience to the Creator. When humanity seeks knowledge only to increase power, status, or control, the result is destruction rather than flourishing. Another lesson is the danger of crossing boundaries set by God. These limits are not arbitrary, they are protective. The Watchers crossed the line between heaven and earth, between the spiritual and the physical, and the consequences were catastrophic. In the same way, when people disregard moral and spiritual boundaries, they invite chaos into their own lives and into the wider world. The story also warns of the slow but certain nature of judgment. The Watchers lived in their rebellion for a time, but their day of reckoning came. This is a reminder that divine justice, though patient, is inevitable. It should inspire humility and repentance, not complacency. In our own time, the pursuit of forbidden knowledge takes new forms. Advancements in technology without ethical restraint, the exploration of spiritual practices divorced from truth, the quest for power at the expense of morality. The echo of the Watchers' fall resounds in these pursuits, and the warning remains the same. Wisdom begins with the fear of the Lord, and without it, even the brightest understanding becomes a path to ruin. The words of Jesus in Matthew 24 ring with prophetic weight. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. This statement draws a direct connection between the world before the flood and the world that will exist before his return. To grasp its meaning is to see the shadow of the Watchers stretching into the future. The days of Noah were marked by violence, corruption, and the blending of what God had set apart. The influence of the Watchers and the existence of the Nephilim had filled the earth with lawlessness. Mankind had turned away from the Creator, following its own desires without restraint. In the modern age, the parallels are unsettling. Advances in genetic science push the boundaries of creation, echoing the forbidden unions that once brought forth the Nephilim. Violence fills the earth, not only in the form of wars, but in the rise of lawlessness within communities. Spiritual rebellion grows as societies elevate personal truth above divine truth. Technology and secret knowledge are idolized, much like the forbidden wisdom once given by the Watchers. Humanity stands on the edge of capabilities that promise great progress, but also carry the potential for unprecedented harm. The warning is clear. History is moving toward a point where the sins of the past will be repeated on a global scale. The return of the days of Noah is not merely about the presence of evil, but about the saturation of the world with it. It is about a culture so immersed in rebellion that the thought of judgment is dismissed as a relic of the past. In such a time, the words of Jesus are both a warning and a guidepost, calling his followers to vigilance, purity, and unwavering faith in the midst of a world that drifts ever closer to the precipice. Even in the shadow of the Watchers' rebellion, the flood of corruption, and the echoes of their influence across the centuries, the story of humanity was never abandoned. The God who judged is also the God who redeems, and his plan for restoration was not an afterthought. Long before the Watchers descended upon Mount Hermon, he had already purposed a way to heal what would be broken. The legacy of the Watchers was one of separation from God, from purity, from the harmony of creation. Yet the message woven through Scripture is that separation is never the final word. The light of divine truth is stronger than the counterfeit brilliance of forbidden knowledge. Where the Watchers offered wisdom without righteousness, God offers revelation rooted in love, truth, and life. This revelation came not in the form of hidden codes or celestial mysteries, but in the person of Jesus Christ. In him, the fullness of divine wisdom is revealed, not the kind that corrupts through pride, but the kind that transforms through humility. While the Watchers sought to elevate themselves by stepping down into the world, Christ humbled himself, taking on human form not to corrupt, but to save. Through his life, death, and resurrection, the curse of spiritual rebellion is broken. Where the Watchers opened the door to darkness, Jesus opened the way back to light. His teaching restored the true understanding of creation, the purpose of life, and the destiny of the human soul. He brought clarity to what had been clouded by deception, revealing that the highest form of knowledge is knowing the one who made all things. Redemption is not merely a matter of erasing the past, but of rewriting the future. Those who once walked in the paths shaped by the influence of the Watchers can be set free to walk in the truth. The same God who bound the fallen angels offers liberty to those bound by the chains of sin and spiritual oppression. The Apostle Paul spoke of this in Colossians 1 verse 13, declaring that God has rescued us from the dominion of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of his beloved Son, even now. In a world where the echoes of forbidden knowledge still tempt, the invitation remains: turn from the counterfeit light and receive the true light that shines in the darkness. In every age, God calls humanity to choose revelation over deception, truth over the lies of the enemy. This is the redemption that restores not only individuals, but the very relationship between Creator and creation. The story that began with rebellion and corruption finds its answer in the unwavering mercy of God. The Watchers may have altered the course of history, but they could not alter the sovereign plan of the one who rules over all. Through Christ, what was lost can be restored, what was broken can be healed, and what was hidden can be revealed in the fullness of his light. Though the Watchers of old sought to twist the destiny of mankind, they were never the true guardians of the human story. Above their rebellion, beyond their schemes, and outside the limits of their reach, the Creator himself has always been the eternal Watcher, faithful, righteous, and unceasing in his care. Unlike the fallen beings who acted out of pride and lust, The gaze of God is one of love and protection. His watchfulness is not for exploitation, but for preservation. Psalm 121, verse 4, declares that he who watches over Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. This is not the passive watching of a distant observer. It is the active, attentive keeping of one who holds the power to defend, to guide, and to restore. From the first breath of humanity to the unfolding of eternity, his eyes have been upon every heart, every tear, every step. No act of rebellion escapes his notice, and no cry for mercy goes unheard. Even in the darkest eras, whether in the days of the Watchers, the days of Noah, or our present age, his light remains, piercing the shadows with a constancy that cannot be diminished. The Watchers brought knowledge that led to destruction, but God offers wisdom that leads to life. The Watchers descended to take for themselves, but God descended in the person of Christ to give himself for us. The contrast could not be sharper. One path leads to ruin. The other leads to redemption and eternal life. To know that God is the eternal Watcher is to live in the assurance that no darkness is too deep, no deception too clever, and no enemy too strong to escape his power. His vigilance is not bound by time or space. Where the Watchers fell, he stands unshaken. Where they brought fear, he brings peace. Where they sowed chaos, he brings perfect order. The story of the Watchers is one of warning, but it also serves as a backdrop for the greater story. The story of a God whose watchful presence ensures that no scheme of the enemy can overturn his purposes. As history moves forward, and as the world faces the growing shadows of spiritual deception, the call remains the same: trust in the one who never sleeps, never abandons, and never loses sight of those who are his. The account of the Watchers is not simply an ancient tale. It is a living reminder of the battle for truth and the faithfulness of the God who prevails over all. Their rebellion brought corruption, but it also revealed the steadfast nature of the one who guards his creation with perfect justice and mercy. Even today, as the echoes of their influence ripple through history, the eternal Watcher remains on his throne. If this journey through the story of the Watchers has opened your eyes to the depth of history, the reality of spiritual warfare, and the hope of redemption, let it inspire you to seek the wisdom that comes only from God. Share what you have learned, live in the light, and guard your heart against the counterfeit wisdom that seeks to lead you astray. If you found value in this message, remember to subscribe to the channel so you do not miss future videos. Like this video to help it reach others. Leave a comment to share your thoughts or questions, and share it with your friends and loved ones so that the truth may continue to spread. Your support helps keep these messages alive and reaching those who need them most.